Hey everybody, it's Justin Michael Williams, and I am so excited to share this video with you, one of my all-time favorite teachings on how to set healthy boundaries and how to have healthy boundaries conversations. In this video, you're gonna learn the #1 mistake that most of us make when we're trying to set healthy boundaries, and also a step-by-step process on how to have these healthy boundary conversations, especially if you're trying to have them with somebody you care about or somebody you love. So listen closely, make sure you have something to take some notes, and let's get into the teaching.
So why boundaries? Why do boundaries matter as it relates to the context of changing our lives and transforming our lives? And I want you to remember that I said, and I often say, there is a difference between change and transformation. Things change all the time, but none of those changes ever have the lasting impact that we want them to have if we have not transformed, if we have not truly transformed. And so in order for us to transform, we have to create a new context in our life. We have to create new containers in our life. We have to often shift relationships in our lives. So if you're going to be able to shift relationships, if you're going to be able to shift context, then you got to learn how to set boundaries. And we're going to talk exactly, literally step by step, exactly about how to do that in this session. Now, what are boundaries? Because boundaries are a word that I think we use very loosely, and sometimes we don't know the difference between boundaries and rules and all this different kind of stuff. So what are boundaries? I'm going to show you a definition that I heard from Prentice Hemphill, which is somebody online who I don't know, and also a friend of mine named Nico Carey. And I kind of combined their quotes into one, and it's become my favorite definition of boundaries of all time. Listen to this with your heart. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love myself and love another simultaneously. And whether that other is a friend or a family member or an inanimate object like alcohol or weed or tobacco or whatever it is, you know, your relationship to your sexuality or your kids or your parents or whatever the another is. Boundaries are the distance at which you can love yourself and love another simultaneously. And so in this way, boundaries are self-esteem in action. Boundaries are a verb, and I got this quote from Casey Crown, who's a dear friend of mine, an amazing teacher and leader. Boundaries are self-esteem in action. They are when we are standing for ourselves, and again, loving ourselves while we love another at the same time. And so this brings me to a really important point. It's about the difference between boundaries and rules, because we confuse these things, okay? So boundaries, this is the way I love to define it. Listen carefully. Boundaries, especially healthy boundaries, are protecting what you love, while rules are often about what you're pushing away. I need you to feel the difference in that. Boundaries are about protecting what you love, whereas rules are often about what you're pushing away. This is the difference between what we're fighting against and what we're moving toward. What we're fighting against and pushing away from, and what we're fighting for. And so boundaries, when they're done in a healthy way, are protecting what you love. And when you look at this, it's very different, because oftentimes we think of boundaries as rules and we feel like we're trying to get rid of the alcohol, we're trying to get rid of the drinking, we're trying to get rid of the toxic habit, and we have to push it away and push it away. No. If you just look at it this way, if here on this side is the alcohol, the person, the toxic habit, the thing, the whatever is happening in your life, the thought, and we're setting rules and we're trying to push it away, then what it looks like is force, force, force. But there's a difference between power and force. There's an amazing book on this. And force often feels like incredible effort, because we're having to push something away that we don't want. But now, if here's that toxic habit, person, belief thing in your life that you need to set a boundary with, and here on this side is your vision, is what you love, then what boundaries actually look like is not force, is walking toward what we love. And in that walking toward what we love, we are automatically turning away from and walking away from the things that bring us down. And this is true power. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do this in this video. Okay? And it doesn't mean that we spiritually bypass and pretend the bad stuff doesn't exist. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying ignore. I'm saying it's a different orientation to the same context, same content, rather. And so, what I want to tell you here is this is important. Healthy boundaries are flexible and adaptive. I want you to write that down. Healthy boundaries are flexible and adaptive, while unhealthy boundaries are rigid or chaotic. Okay, so rigid and chaotic is, for example, you're trying to go on a diet or something, right? Your vision is about you being more healthy. And so an unhealthy boundary is, I'm never gonna eat this, I'm never gonna do this. That's a rigid boundary, right? I'm never gonna touch these things, I'm never gonna eat any carbs. And y'all already know, when you set those kind of rules, rules are meant to be what? Broken, right? And so so this is a rigid boundary. And a chaotic boundary is you just eating everything in the kitchen, everything inside, trying this diet, trying that diet, trying something else. That's a chaotic boundary, right? And this is what most of us do. We flip between rigidity and chaos. We create this strict rule, and then we slingshot all the way over to the other side, okay? Slingshot all the way over to the other side because we've created two rigid boundaries, and then we go into chaos, and then all we end up doing is flipping back and forth between chaos and rigidity, thinking that we're flipping between unhealthiness and healthiness. So we often think that the rigidity is the boundary, but rigidity is not the boundary. Rigidity is just another form of an unhealthy boundary. Healthy boundaries are flexible and adaptive. And that means, listen carefully, boundaries require self-awareness. Because you need to have awareness of yourself, your emotions, your mood, where you are at that time, your sensitivity, what you're going through, to know how to set a boundary that is appropriate for the moment at hand, how to set a flexible and adaptive boundary that matches your life. And so oftentimes we create rules and try to create this rigidity to pretend or create a facade of control. But you can look through your life. It doesn't work. It never works that way. And this is not just my opinion. This is based upon years and years of study of psychology and addiction release and all of that y'all know I geek out on. And so flexible and adaptive boundaries are the ones that work. And I'm going to teach you how to create those here. Okay, so self-awareness. Let me start by using an example that we'll be able to pull through this entire session, okay? So this is kind of going to pull a lot of pieces together for you. So let's say in your vision, you've recognized that you are somebody who's healthy and who is alcohol-free. I'm making no judgments on alcohol, any of that right now, but I'm just saying let's pretend for an example that you're alcohol-free, and you can weave in any other part of your own vision here that you'd like. And so alcohol-free, right? So you then decide that you're not going to drink. And you decide on a certain amount of time, because you've realized that you have this toxic habit, you've identified drinking as a toxic habit. Pardon me for pausing for a second here because I'm seeing how to weave this exactly in a simple way. So you've decided that one of your toxic habits that you want to release is alcohol. And again, you can insert your own here, okay? And so let's pretend, as we look at this example of self-awareness, that one of your best friends invites you to their birthday party at your favorite bar. The bar that you love to go to that makes your all-time favorite drinks. Well, what happens then? This is where boundaries come into play. And so we're going to weave this story kind of through as we learn some tools together. So I want to teach you the number one thing that boundaries require. Number one thing. I talked about self-awareness, but there's something even more important that boundaries require. And it is tolerance to discomfort, or tolerance for discomfort. So I want you to pay attention to me very closely here, because this might be the most important thing that I share with you in this entire video. Why do boundaries require us to tolerate discomfort? Well, because when you set a boundary, you can't control how people respond to your boundaries. And so you need resilience to hold those boundaries, even if the other person doesn't understand, doesn't get it, is disappointed, is mad, is upset. And so what we have to do is expand our window of tolerance for discomfort and disappointment. And this leads me to the biggest lie that we tell ourselves when we're trying to set boundaries. This is the biggest lie that we tell ourselves, okay? So here's what normally happens, all right? I'm gonna just keep it super real with y'all. Let's say we needed to set a boundary with somebody, okay? For example, this person who's your best friend, who is having a birthday party at your favorite bar. And let's say, for example, you know that you probably shouldn't go. But what we do is we don't set the boundary because we create this facade of altruism, acting like we're so nice that I'm not gonna set a boundary with them because I don't wanna hurt their feelings. You've said this before, right? I know you have. And so, God, now I got my screen all greasy. So we are talking about boundaries. And when we say that we're not gonna set a boundary, we're like, well, you know, this person's going through a really hard time right now, so I don't want to tell them. I'm just going to wait till the next time it comes up and bring it up then. Or I don't want to say anything because I don't want to hurt their feelings. Or, you know what, I don't really need to tell them. It's just going to harm them. I'm just going to process it on my own. So we do this kind of vow of altruism, thinking that we're such a good person, that we're protecting this other person by not setting a boundary. Lies. Bullshit. I'm calling bullshit. And I'm saying with great love because I do this too, right? I've done this too. But what I'm about to tell you next, this is the big piece, okay? This is the biggest lie we tell about boundaries because it has nothing to do with hurting the other person's feelings or trying to wait till the right moment. The only reason that we don't set a boundary when we need to set one, and again, this is proven from evidence-based tons of research stories, and especially in actual research and stories, and especially people in our own community. I've worked with thousands of people now, and you'll tell me if this works for you and if this applies to you. The reason we actually don't set the boundary is because we don't want to have to sit with the discomfort of someone else being mad at us or upset with us or disappointed at us, or angry at us when we stand in our own truth. And so instead of setting the boundary and disappointing another person, we abandon our own selves under the false guise of altruism and being nice, when really we've just abandoned our own truth so that we don't have to sit with another person's disappointment. Here's another quote from Casey Crown. She says, "Many of us are conditioned to be so uncomfortable with disappointment and withholding another person's disappointment that we are completely willing to abandon our own knowing and truth in order to ensure that another person is not uncomfortable. And therefore, we don't set boundaries so that we don't have to sit with the disappointment of having caused disappointment." I need you to feel that. So that we don't have to sit with the disappointment of having caused another person disappointment. And so really, it's not about being altruistic or nice. It's about manipulating the truth so you can control somebody else's response to be something that you can tolerate a little more easily. Woo! I know it's hot. It's like a hot stove here, right? This is big. And so I want to read you now this beautiful quote that comes from a longer prose or poem piece by Oriah Mountain Dreamer. What a name, right? And I love the woo names. And I say this every time I teach boundaries because I think it can't be said better than this. Listen to this carefully with your heart. "It doesn't interest me if the story you are telling me is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself, if you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul, if you can be faithless and therefore trustworthy. And so this is what it's really about. What are you committed to? What are you really committed to? Are you committed to truth with a capital T? Are you committed to growth? Are you committed to connecting in and expanding and transforming your power? Or are we committed to people pleasing and just trying to make everybody around us happy? And then building resentment because we feel like they are keeping us in a box, when really we're the ones putting up the walls of the box around us. And so this is deep inner work. This is the deep shadow work. And what it really comes down to is, are you committed to truth or are you committed to fear? And so the next time you need to set a boundary, and I'm going to tell you some steps on how to do it that will blow your mind. Literally, it completely flips boundaries on its head. You need to ask yourself, why am I telling myself I shouldn't set this boundary? What's the story I'm making up in my head about why I should not or cannot or probably shouldn't set this boundary? And how is it that you might be withholding your actual truth? And the thing is, this is the real truth, okay? When we withhold the actual truth, our truth, we are actually taking the other person's choice away. We are taking the other person's freedom away. And we are taking the other person's opportunity to potentially grow away, because we're leaving them without the chance to respond to our truth. And this person in your life should have the choice to respond to what is actually true. And so when we protect what we love, when we stand in our truth, we set the appropriate boundaries to protect that growth and transformation. And so let's talk really quickly about how to set boundaries. How to set boundaries. Now, I'm going to go back to this story, okay? Here's the narrative, and I'm going to bring these slides back up in a second, so don't stress. Let's say you gave up drinking because in your vision, you decided you wanted to be somebody who was practicing sobriety. You recognized drinking as a toxic habit that was keeping you from your vision, and you've decided to do 60 days or 40 days or 3 months or 6 months or whatever of no drinking. And then your best friend calls. This is your best friend, one of your best, closest friends who does so many things for you. And this is a friend who never celebrates themselves, who never has joy, and you're always convincing this friend to do something kind for themselves, to celebrate themselves. And this is a big birthday. This is your friend's 40th birthday, big birthday. And the friend sends out an invitation. And because boundaries require flexibility, self-awareness, adaptiveness, the invitation comes to RSVP, and you check in with yourself that day. And you say, okay, how am I feeling right now? Do I think I can go to this party and stand and keep my commitment to myself? And that day, your answer is yes. So you RSVP for the party, and you say, I'm going to go. And that's a healthy way, because you checked in, you knew that I can go to the bar, I can see the drinks, I can do this. I'm far enough along my journey that I know I can do this. And you're not lying to yourself. You're being truly and honestly self-aware. So you RSVP and you say yes. Now comes the day of the party. And that day at work, you had some big stressful thing happen. And you're feeling sensitive. And before you even remembered or thought about going to the party, you already wanted to leave work and have a drink because you were so stressed. Whatever happened was so harmful, so exhausting, so debilitating that you wanted to reach for that alcohol. And then you realize, oh shit, it's my friend's party tonight. I RSVP'd and I said I could go. And then you have the thought, I really shouldn't go because I'm already risking my sobriety. This is the moment where everything you've learned, where boundaries count. Because if you're being self-aware, if you're practicing self-esteem in action, if you're practicing the distance at which you can love yourself and love your friend at the same time, then the moment that you recognize that, you would call your friend and have a conversation. Now, let me tell you how this conversation usually goes for people, okay? You realize that you shouldn't go. You spend 2 hours in the car debating on if you should go or if you not go. You go to the gym to try to feel better. You realize you still don't. You're getting more and more stressed because you don't want to disappoint your friend. You think they're going to be mad at you. You call another friend and say, oh my God, what should I do? I don't know if I should go. And your other friend says, gosh, well, you should go. It's a big birthday. I think you'll be fine. And inside, you know you're not going to be fine. And then you just get confused and work yourself up even more. And then you either go to the party even though you shouldn't have gone to the party and you don't set a boundary, or you wait until 5 minutes before the party and you call your friend and say, I'm so sorry that I can't make it. Or you text your friend, or you don't say anything at all and then wonder why you have issues next time and you break the trust. Right? So many things that could happen. Let me show you the alternative, okay, around how to set healthy boundaries. This is the easiest way. This is what you should do in that context, and you can apply this anywhere in your life. First thing is, as soon as you have the self-awareness, right away, you pick up and call the friend. And the first thing you do, you might even text them first, but before you start spilling your heart out and explaining everything, you first ask them, hey, are you ready to drop? If they're ready to drop in with you, you say, hey, I want to talk with you about something important. Do you have a second right now? Because what so many of us do is we create this whole story in our head and we say how we want to set the boundary and we've practiced everything that we want to say and we've written notes and we've talked to people, and then you call the person to have the conversation and they're in the middle of the grocery store. And you catch them completely off guard. You've had all this time to prepare, they've had none, and then you're wondering why when you set boundaries it doesn't go well. So the first thing is preparation. It's just asking the person, are they in a space where they can drop in with you? And you might even text them and say, hey, I want to talk to you about something. Can you call me when you have a minute? And they might say, hey, I'm in the store right now, or I'm really rushing right now. Can I call you back in 10 minutes? And they might say, well, I don't have time right now. You say, please, this is really important. Do you have 5 minutes? Okay, so there. You've told your friend, and the friend's like, okay, I'll call you back. I'm in the grocery store shopping for the party. I'll call you in 10 minutes. And then you go to the second step, okay, which is owning the truth of what you're feeling. Owning the truth of what you're feeling. So in this case, with a friend that you love, that you were excited to go to the party, it may sound something like this. I'm really nervous and afraid to have this conversation with you right now because I love you so much and I am so excited to celebrate you, and I don't want what I'm about to say, or I'm afraid that what I'm about to say might make you think that I care about you less than I do. But I want you to know how much you mean to me, and that's why I'm actually really afraid to have this conversation right now. Notice that. And from that vulnerability, owning the truth of what you're feeling. Notice I use feeling words. I'm afraid, I'm scared, I'm nervous, I'm anxious. This is about you first, right? Because you're protecting what you love. And from that space, that vulnerability creates a space of connection and compassion. And that space of connection and compassion, you are opening up and holding that space, because your friend might not know this 7-step process, might not know how to do this. So you got to walk in and hold and create and set the container with connection and compassion. Because once you have the connection and compassion, now people can listen more deeply and you can actually move forward. Now, going to the fourth step, okay, is don't arrive with solutions. And let me be very clear. Step 2, create step 3. By you being vulnerable, you create a space of connection and compassion. Then we go to step 4, which is don't arrive with solutions. So most of us think, before we even go have the conversation to try to set the boundary, that we need to know all the answers, how everything's going to work, and that never feels good. To the other person on the receiving end of that, it feels like you're setting rules, you're pointing fingers, you're deciding what they're choosing. And so don't arrive with the solutions. What I say to people is, when you're setting a boundary, especially if it's with somebody you love and who cares about you in some way, then you can create the boundary together. And so instead of arriving with solutions, just share the dilemma. So the wrong way of doing this is, I've decided that I'm not coming to your party, and so I think what we should do is tomorrow I want to take you to dinner. And the friend's like, I don't want to go to dinner tomorrow. I don't have time to go to, do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many things that could be said here. And even though it doesn't feel harmful, it's like you're saying, I'm not going to your party, and here's what I'm saying that we're going to do instead. The alternative is this, okay? Check it out. So you've said the connection, I'm really nervous, anxious to have this conversation with you. But I've had a really tough day at work today. And I want you to know how important it is to me that I'm practicing sobriety right now. It is helping me on my journey of becoming who I want to be. And it's one of the most important things to me. This is talking about protecting what you love. And because of what happened at work today, I know I RSVP'd for your party, but I'm really nervous about coming to the party because I don't think I'm going to hold my sobriety. And I'm really scared to tell you this. And I'm wondering what you think we should do. Does this even sound like a boundaries conversation now? What do you think we should do? And the friend might go, oh, so now you're not saying, here's the rule, here's what's going to happen. What do you think we should do? And the friend might give a suggestion that you don't like, and you say, oh, you know what, that's a good idea, but I don't know. And then you get the collaborative process to create the boundaries together. And the friend might say something like, oh my gosh, I'm going home right now to set up and get ready. Why don't you just come by right now and be with me? Or we're all going to dinner afterwards, after the bar. I didn't tell you that part because I was going to be a surprise. Why don't you just meet us at dinner instead? Whatever it is. And then you get to discuss and create a solution together. And now, listen, this doesn't even feel like a boundaries conversation, but this is the power of how it works. Now, leading into number 5, which is don't attach to the outcome. The person might not respond nicely. Your friend might be stressed and say, you know what, it's always all about you. You tell me that I should celebrate myself. I come to everything that you do for your life and your party, and I'm always supporting you. And any time it's for me, you don't show up. Don't attach to the outcome. They have free will to respond. And if they respond the way they do, and you're standing in truth with a capital T, truth always wins. And that truth might inspire them to maybe be upset for a second, but that might deeply take you into a conversation that allows both of you to grow and learn. And sometimes it takes weeks, months, years for that to happen. But here's the big piece, okay? Don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until it's too late. And the reason why I say this is in this context with the friend, right? You wait, and because we wait until it's too late, you're texting them or calling them right before the party when it's too late to have a conversation about it. Or what some of you do, we've all done this, is we say, well, I'm just gonna wait till it happens next time, or I don't wanna say anything yet. And then you've built up so much resentment that you can't even find compassion if you tried with a magnifying glass. And so that a little tiny thing happens and you blow up because you've had so much resentment because you haven't set the boundary. And so don't wait till it's too late. When you get the self-awareness, be forthright and have the conversation when it's time, not when you feel like there's a right moment for it, because there's never that. That moment usually means it's too late. Be forthright about your truth when there's not a crisis, if you can. And then finally, be open to the mystery and trust. Be open to the mystery and trust. Because if you're standing in your truth, truth will prevail. I'm going to tell you a very short story here that's very personal to me, okay? I've only recently started sharing this story, and my dad knows that I share this story. So many of you know I grew up in a home with domestic violence, right? Severe domestic violence, both my mom with my stepdad, and with my stepdad beating my mom, and with my dad, who was a police officer, beating his wives, that he had several wives and girlfriends as we were growing up in front of us. Like, just the most terrible, terrible things that you could ever imagine, okay? Terrible things that we had to see. And so growing up, I never had a conversation with my dad about this. The code in our family was don't speak about it, don't talk about it, don't say nothing about it. And so I grow up And starting at 19 years old, I start realizing how what I saw as a kid was impacting me. I start going to therapy. I've been in therapy for 10 years, spent tens of thousands of dollars doing work on my anger, on how it's impacted my relationships, on how what I saw as a kid with my dad impacted my life, but I had never talked to my dad about it. And so one time, after I'd done enough work on myself, I was ready and I recognized I've never talked to my dad about this. I'm still in the code. And me and my dad are pretty close. We talk regularly. But I felt there was this wall between us, and I thought the wall was because of him, but it was really the wall because of me, because I had unexpressed emotions that I hadn't communicated. And so I did all of this. I wrote this beautiful letter to my dad, calling him forward and not out, saying, Dad, I'm telling you this to bring us closer, not to tear us apart. And you guys know I teach this stuff. So I sent just an A+ letter. I even sent it to Robert Masters, who's my shadow work coach, to make sure it was good, to make sure it was true. And I communicated to my dad with owning my emotions. This is how what happened in my childhood impacted me. And I just want you to know how this impacted me. I call my dad, I tell him, I read the letter, and he flips. Oop.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Listen to Siri, y'all. And my dad flips out, okay? Flips completely out. He flips. And he calls my family. He hangs up on me. He says to me, actually, well, if I'm the one who ruined your fucking life, then we don't ever have to talk again. And he hangs up. He starts calling my aunts and my uncles and my sisters and everybody and saying this. And then my whole family's calling me saying, Justin, I can't believe you did that to Dad. How could you do that to Dad? And so here's my whole family against me. And I'm standing there, and my mom, who knows, because my mom's done a lot of this work, she calls me and she said, hold steady, son. Hold steady. You're standing in truth. Because I had broke the family code. I talked about it. How dare I? And so for 3 weeks, I didn't hear from my dad, which is a long time for us. We text talk almost every day. And I text him, he doesn't respond. I call him, I leave him a message. Dad, I just want to let you know I'm doing this to bring us closer, not to tear us apart. Call me when you can. Nothing. 3 weeks later, my phone rings. And it's my dad. And he goes, hello. That's how my dad talks. Hello. He's a macho man, police officer, whole thing. Said, hey, Dad. What's up? What's up, son? And so I'm talking to him, and what I learn in that moment makes me weep. Literally makes me want to cry every time I say it. Because what happened in that moment was my dad tells me that in his tirade of calling the whole family, he called my grandfather, his dad. And he said to my grandfather, can you believe Justin did all this? Can you believe Justin said this to me? And my grandfather says, well, son, I do. And I believe it's about time you and I have our first conversation about what you saw when you were a kid. And so, truth prevailed. Because my dad talking to my grandfather for the first time in his whole life about the abuse that my grandfather did to my grandmother, to my baka, that my dad saw that they had never discussed, opened up. And this is what I mean by the healing work that you're doing here and now impacts generations forward and backward. This is not just about you and the little thing that's happening in your life in this moment that seems so significant that isn't going to matter soon. It's about healing generations forward and backward. The work that our families who maybe didn't have access to this kind of information were never able to do because they didn't have it. And so here we are, the first generation with an opportunity to do work this deeply in this way. And so with my dad, listen, family calling everybody. What most people would do in that context is call back, well, what I really meant was this, and I didn't really mean to say that, and I really didn't mean, and then our boundaries become porous, and then we're wondering why people don't respect our boundaries because we set the boundary, and then we're like, well, never mind, I didn't actually mean to set a boundary that hard because we can't handle them coming at us with whatever their natural response is. And so we abandon ourselves, and our boundaries become porous, and then people don't know what the hell the boundary is in the first place. It's like crying wolf, right? And so because I stood in that truth, it's not because of me, it's because of truth. My dad got to have that conversation. And then him not talking to me for 3 weeks, he told me, had nothing to do with him being mad at me. It was because he needed time to process his conversation with his dad, because him accepting me and what happened to me would mean him accepting himself and what happened to him. And so this often has nothing to do with you. It's other people's stuff. And you have to give them the freedom. Actually, no. The gift of standing in truth and the transformation that comes because of it. And so this is what I mean by be open to the mystery and trust. Now, I already told you all that whenever you're going to set a boundary, you're going to have fear come up. And you have to ask yourself, what is the story I'm telling myself about why I cannot or should not set this boundary? And once you have that story, then you can step into truth, not abandon yourself, and step forward. And what I always say is clear boundaries, no limits. Clear boundaries, no limits. Because once you have identified the boundary, you can go all the way to the edge instead of trying to figure out what the boundary is and not experience the fullness that can happen inside of the boundary that you set.
Thank you so much for listening to this video on healthy boundaries. This is just one of many teachings that we have out in the universe for you. And I hope you continue to learn from us. If you found this useful, you can of course subscribe to our channel, but even more importantly, you can listen to our podcast, which is called the Kingdom Podcast, where we give teachings every single week. We have luminaries from all over the world, including Marianne Williamson and more. And you can find that anywhere that you listen to podcasts. You can sign up for our email list. And most importantly, just join our community, because this is a community of people who are rising together. And I hope you feel like you're a part of the family now. All right. Much love. Set those boundaries and we rise together. Bye for now.